So let's make today's opener a little bit educational, sort of. So it's about hair. As you can see, I have a lot of it. I started growing it since the start of the pandemic. So this is how much it grows from a haircut that's like hella short, like I'd say like a 1, to this. That's how long it takes me, a year, to grow this out. Can you guess how long this is? This is 8 inches. I grew 8 inches, or I guess 7 inches, in a year. Ain't that something? Now here's something interesting is, if you want to donate hair like this to Locks of Love or any of those other groups, so that you can give people wigs, because, you know, they're bald because of, like, cancer and things like that, because of chemo, they prefer 8 to 14 inches. So I'm just at the bottom of it. So I'd like to grow it out more. Now, I haven't been at work in a while because of my back injury, and I'm finally going back next week. And so I'm like, I don't want to waste this. I'd like to donate it, but it's barely at the bottom of the thing, so I wish I could get it a little bit longer. Here's the thing. My bosses are both bald, and they give me a lot of crap about my hair because it was already growing out before I went to surgery. And I don't know if there's actually a work thing that doesn't allow me to have long hair. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's a work thing or if just they're jealous because they're bald. I don't know which one it is. But hopefully I can grow this out more so I can donate it, or I just have to shave this all off and then donate it. All I know is, soon, all this is going to be gone in some point in the next couple months, most likely. And I'm hoping I can at least donate it. So the education you learned is just, Scarf's hair grows 8 inches a year, and wigs are like a foot long if you want to donate. So if you have long hair and want to donate, you need like about a foot of hair. Welcome friends, Last Scarf here, vlog time. So, 3 things. We're going to go over the channel, then I'm going to go over NFTs a little bit, and then we're going to have something educational about water. So that should be fun. First up the channel, the second Amiibo tournament has come out. You should check it out. It's really good. Amiibos can do a lot more than level 9 characters in Smash. They just can do better things. They can do combos. You can teach them so many really cool tricks. I've been teaching them things, and it's really cool to see what these Amiibos can do in a tournament against each other. It's been really fun. The first tournament was fun. The second one has been amazing. I'm really excited to see how these Amiibos develop in the third tournament, which will be in like a month. Like, I'm doing like one a month because of how long it takes to work on these things. Also because we have all these other projects. Other thing with the channel is Hitman LP's almost done. After that will be the Professor Layton LP, which I have to work on. So there's going to be a gap before we get there. I was debating Bravely Default 2, but it's not. Bravely Default 2, this is the thing with RPGs. They have to be stellar all the way through to be worth watching the whole way to be an LP to put up. It's not. Bravely Default 2 pales, unfortunately, in comparison to its previous games, which is unfortunate. It's still got some goodness to it, but it's not a fun watch. It really is not. So that's going to go on the side channel after I finish playing the whole thing, because I'm still going to record it all. So Professor Lane will be the next LP on the main channel, while the side channel will eventually have this full Bravely Default 2 LP, which is going to be pretty long, because it's an RPG after all. It's not Origami King. Origami King I felt was really good the entire way through, and that's because of how they spread out the storytelling throughout that game. The dungeons weren't too long, and there was a lot of dialogue in dungeon, which really helps propel a game along. I think Origami King shows how you really should do RPGs. Also, to an extent, I would say also Undertale did that as well. Undertale gave you a lot of bits as you're going through places. And Origami King does the same thing. You go deeper into this dungeon, you get more dialogue as you're going. You don't get in this point where you're just only playing the game and just dungeon crawling, which is what I appreciate for storytelling. Whereas Bravely Default, you'll have an hour to 2 hours of just dungeon crawling, and that's not fun to watch. Also, not that fun to play, honestly. I need more story. It just gets really boring and monotonous when you're just dungeon crawling through. It's fun to grind in RPGs, sure, but not when you want to get into the story. It makes it less fun. I also want to record the Portal 2 anniversary. I think it's sometime soon. And for personal playing, Monster Hunter is coming out soon, so I'll be playing plenty of that with Jinx. I don't know if we're going to record any of it, but that should be fun. Oh, also, Kirby podcast, we'll be working on the next 2-parter episode for that soon. And on top of all of that, eventually I'll have to... The next game is going to be Superstar, Kirby Superstar, and that's going to be co-opted with Jinx, so that's going to be an interesting recording session to happen. And the last project to bring up is the next movie project. So the next movie list, ranking list, is going to be Star Trek. We're going to do all the Star Trek movies chronologically, so the original Star Trek movies, then the TNG movies, then the J.J. Abrams movies. I'm pretty sure that's all of them, right? It's only been like 3 sets of movies, I think. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's just that, just Star Trek, original, TNG, and the J.J. Abrams versions of the originals. So, that's what we're going to do, and it'll be interesting to see, because Jinx will rank the movies, and I'll rank the movies, how we just feel about them, and I'm curious if Wrath of Khan will be number 1 or not, because everyone says it's the greatest movie ever, so we'll see about that, but I saw these when I was a child, I don't remember them all that well. The way it's going to work is, we're going to intro the movies, like, here's the movie, like the budget of it, how well it did, and then anything we remember, if we remember watching it when we were kids. I don't think I remember much. And then we'll watch the movie, and then we'll reflect on the movie. And you can join in on that. So you can see the first part of the video, pause the video, watch the movie, and then reflect on it with us in the comments and things like that, and see if my reaction is the same as yours and things like that. It's fun to talk about things after all. That's what we're doing. So those are all the projects happening right now. So, NFTs. This whole episode is going to be about NFTs, but I feel like it's still too complicated to explain right now, and I haven't fully wrapped my head around it. Jinx understands what's going on, and they've explained it to me 2 or 3 times, and I still don't understand all of it, so I'll only talk about the part I can go over, and that is the ethics of it all. Not the whole thing, but the ethics of a problem. So right now, if you're an artist on Twitter, talking about NFTs is a minefield, and you probably shouldn't even bother right now. And it's unfortunate, because there are blockchains, but there are just people setting up these big lists of people to block for even talking about NFTs, just even discussing it, not just blindly going, okay, so we should just not do NFTs, and just for not blindly not doing NFTs, they're getting put on block lists. So artists are at each other's throats right now. They're just attacking each other, and that's a problem. And it's because I beat this to a dead horse, and that is some people feel like they have a moral high ground, and they are given power right now to make these lists, and they're just arbitrarily putting people on these lists. So there are people getting blocked for no good reason, just for even thinking about NFTs, like trying to understand what's going on with it, instead of just blindly accepting that, oh, I'm supposed to just not do NFTs. That's not good. That's very bad. That's very stifling. And this is where people fail, is when you get so righteous that people aren't even allowed to utter a thing. That's when you really screw things up and you drive people away, and that's not good. This is a problem with righteousness, and also just expecting others to fall into line instead of letting them explore and understand it themselves. That is a big problem with the hive mind sometimes with Twitter and things like that. Here's an example. One can be a person they feel this person is just, I'm not going to say any real people, just the fictional example, but it does happen, where it's this person maybe said something racial in the past, or something just not cool in the past, and other people are like, you shouldn't follow them, why are you following them, things like that, you should unfollow them for these reasons, and they expect you to unfollow them immediately, and they'll get mad at you for not doing what they said, when you're like, wait, hold on, let me look up and see all this stuff, see if they've grown and things like that. And they'll get mad at you just for being willing to just not take their word for it and just investigating what they said. And that's not good. It's important to investigate. It's important to look into things. It's important to not just go like, oh, okay, I'll do what you said and just do it, because then you're not really thinking. And thought is important. So the unethical thing, since I went way off of what I wanted to talk about, real quick with NFTs. Maybe next week I'll understand it well enough to explain the whole picture. Because I feel like even people there are people putting up the whole picture, but some of them are also just being salacious on purpose as well, which is not helpful. But I'll go over this one part, and that is why the artists are freaking out. And that is because there are accounts on Twitter that are just making NFTs of everyone's art, and making it and acting like it's theirs and selling it. So art theft is happening actively on Twitter right now. And probably the other sites as well, social media. And so artists are freaking out about that. A bunch of artists have locked their accounts and things like that. And so there's this big argument, a bunch of talking, a bunch of people blocking each other and all this stuff. And yeah, that's a problem. That's not a good thing. It is unethical right now to do NFTs, I feel. for the base reason of art theft. You can argue all those other things, but I think that there's a lot of complication people don't understand with that. But it's unethical because anyone can NFT your art instead of only you can NFT your art. Because then it goes on the onus of you, because if someone else NFTs your art, it's the onus on you to prove you own it, instead of from the beginning, the onus on them proving they own it. And that's a problem. NFTs should be harder to make. It should be you have to prove you are the owner of this thing, don't know how because they want to make it automated, so that you have control over the NFT, and then all the money made off that NFT is made towards you, not toward an art thief. And I don't know how you can do that. I don't know how you can, well, do that well with automation. It feels like you really would need to have some sort of verification process that verifies that you are the artist who made this art, and that requires a person. And if we're having like thousands of transactions, so on and so forth, just big numbers of transactions happening, that's not exactly easy to do, and that's unfortunate. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's unethical right now to do NFTs, because anyone could be making the NFT regardless if they're the owner or not, and that's not good. It should be only the owner can, or people that they have given the right to do it can. NFTs are in a way to copyright your own work, but others can copyright your work for you, whether you know it or not, and that's not good. That is not ethical in any way. And unfortunately, the law is so far behind on technology that we can't rely on that at all. The mistake was, all we do is elect mostly the oldest people and the most out-of-touch people to our government, and that does not help. That does not help at all. Okay, so today we're going to be educational in this section here. So you have seen RPs and DCAs all over your town. You just don't know that's what they're called. And this is an RP. You may have seen it caged or uncaged. And you have definitely seen the DCAs, and that's these. They're these giant apparatuses. They are called, the DCA is the double check valve assembly, and the RP is called the reduced pressure zone, is what they also call it, so RPVs, Zs. And what these are is they have to do with backflow prevention. Also, sometimes you'll see on a hose at the nozzle, you'll see some little apparatus there, and that is a vacuum breaker. That is also a backflow preventer. There's like 4 to 6 types. The majority of what you'll see are these 3 I just described. So before I describe what they do, let me explain 2 things. They are back pressure and back siphonage. When you drink out of a straw, if you didn't realize, when you're sucking, you fill your lungs. And what this does is it causes a pressure. It causes a pressure so that you can siphon the drink into your mouth to consume. And then back pressure would be just blowing into the straw. The bubbles you're making is back pressure. So that's the simplest way to explain these 2 concepts. In a water system must constantly be flowing a certain pressure. It's crap, I'm going to say it wrong off the top of my head, so I won't say it. But it's a certain pressure. It's a specific amount of water flowing through to maintain a specific pressure, and that pressure is necessary for just running water to different businesses, and also for firemen, so that they can have a specific pressure they know they're always going to have when they're fighting fires. So there's constantly water going through for pressure in the system to keep things flowing. But things happen where, let's say like a building where, okay, let's go with a factory. There's a factory, and it's using the water supply directly linked to where it's mixing chemicals, and something in the water system breaks, and it causes a back siphoning situation, and the water gets pulled back into the water system. This happened back in the day, before we had backflow prevention. So just say a fertilizer plant, or just, not a fertilizer plant, say just a plant mixing chemical, having the water directly go into their tanks and mixing chemical, and then something breaks in the system and it gets pulled back through the pipes. And that goes into the water system, and then someone takes a shower and all that chemical goes on them. That has happened in the past before backflow prevention was a thing. Another example, because that was siphoning, another example would be pressure. So something happens at the plant, or at the factory, bunch of water just getting in there, a bunch of pressure in there, and it pushes all that chemical back through the system. It's stronger than the pressure in the system, pushes it all back, and now it's in the system, and people taking showers or doing whatever get affected with it. That has happened in history. A smaller example of this would be a church. So this has happened at a church. They were making lemonade. And they're using, of course, water from the sink for the lemonade. The water system is perfectly clean, it's all safe and everything. At the same time at this church is a fumigator, or an exterminator, that's a better word, an exterminator. And he's got a bucket, and he's filling that bucket with water, and he's also got, like, tabs or powder of chemical in there so he can make his bug killer. And the hose is in the bucket. So it's submerged in it, and it's just filling with water, and it's filling, and this chemical's in there mixing up. And then in the system, something breaks. And the pressure in the system makes a vacuum, and because of this vacuum, the water in that bucket goes in the hose and goes into the church's water system. And from there, it goes into the sink, and it goes into the lemonade. And people drank this lemonade, and they got sick. This is a real case that happened in America. The backflow prevention there is that little hose thing I mentioned. So, what would happen is, you had this little thing on the hose nozzle, and then the hose would go over it. And when the vacuum happens, it just shuts. It just closes right on the thing, so no water gets through. That's why it's called a vacuum breaker, because it breaks the vacuum. And so, I might be explaining that a little incorrectly, but that's what it does. It just breaks the vacuum so that this water doesn't get sucked up into the system, so no one gets sick. So before backflow prevention, these rare cases could harm people horribly. Because it requires something going wrong in the system, something breaking the system or something shutting off in the system, and it causes a pressure issue. But thankfully, we have these backflow preventers now, and they do it through pressure. So an RP is what would stop the factory. So this factory's got all this stuff going on here, and this RP is hooked up between the water supply and the factory. The water goes through one way. It's going to the factory, and if an issue happens, say back siphoning or back pressure, depending on which side, of course, the check valve in that RP, this is why it's called a reduced pressure zone, it just closes, and then they can't get through. And so all that, whatever's in that factory doesn't get into the water supply, and we're all safe. That's how that one works. Same thing goes for the DCV, the bigger one. Now, the bigger ones are used for fire systems. They're used for sprinkler systems. Because those systems need there's a lot more just water going around. Just think of a building. Just think of your tallest building. One of those things is there for that building. Or one of those things is there for like a system of apartments. That's what they're for the fire systems, for the sprinklers. And they're there to keep the pressure and also to prevent any of that crap coming back. Because the thing is fire system water is dirty as balls. Why? Because how often do fires happen to one place? It might happen once in a lifetime. So that water's been sitting in there for a while. That water in there could be nasty. You never want to be around when the sprinklers go off. Because nobody really spends the money to just have some guy go up and just turn on every sprinkler and drain it and flush it out. And then what you do is you take a bucket up to the sprinkler, you turn it on, turn it off, and then you go to the next one. You do that. People don't hire people to do that. They just let the water sit there. Standing water always goes bad. Because there's nothing keeping it good. Like, chlorine eventually goes away. That's just how it works. So, yeah, standing water goes bad, it gets nasty, and if a fire happens, get the hell out of there, not only because you don't want the fire near you, but because you don't want that water on you either. How do I know this? Because I'm certified. So, it's every 2 years, I think, you have to recertify, and in backflow prevention, in backflow testing. So I have a permit in backflow preventer testing. So I can test these apparatuses, see what's wrong with them, know what's wrong with them. Is it the check valve? Is it some of these other things that are in the apparatus? I can know what the problem is. I can test that out. And with that knowledge, I'd be like, okay, here's the problem, or oh, it's perfectly fine and it's good for the year. Like, you test them once a year. You test every single one of those things you see are tested every year to keep the public safe. And if they do break, then there's people who can repair them. There's good money in being a tester, and there's good money in being a repair person. If I did not get the job I have, I could have done that. And it's more of a freelance job because you're just waiting to get called. Or you can be in a company of people who get called to do that. You get paid I think you get paid like $50. Like, that's just the general. You can get paid $50 or $100 or whatever. $50 I think is the minimum, so $50 per one. And they're everywhere in your city. They're everywhere across the country. They're everywhere in the world. They're everywhere because they protect the water systems. So there you go. There's some education for you. There you go. Now you know what those things are in your city. They're there to make sure that whatever chemicals in that building doesn't go back and hurt other people and contaminate the water supply. That's really what it is. That's what they're for. So that right there was the vlog. I had fun talking. I'll be up from watching and listening, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Having fun. Thanks for coming by, and see you next time.